My ex-wife's mom looked straight at me through her living room window, smirked, and whispered. "Want to look?" I froze. My hand was still holding a plastic cup, water spilling over my fingers and onto my shoes. For a second, my brain just stopped. I could not move. I could not think. I only saw her lips form those words, and her eyes watching me like she already knew what I was feeling. Let me go back a bit. My name is Derek. I am 35 years old, and 8 months ago my marriage to Amy ended. We were together for 3 years, and the last one felt like a slow car crash. By the end, we could not spend 10 minutes in the same room without some kind of fight starting. What to eat for dinner turned into a debate. Where to go on the weekend turned into a battle. Every small thing became a test we both failed. When we signed the divorce papers, I did not cry. I did not feel free either. I just felt empty and tired, like I had been running a race no one could ever win. I packed my things, shoved my life into boxes, and found a small apartment in a place called Riverside Commons. It was a quiet complex on the edge of town. No one there knew my name. No one knew my story. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to breathe without people asking, "How are you holding up?" or giving advice I never asked for. The apartment was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, a tiny balcony, old carpet, and a kitchen that hummed at night. But it was mine. Only mine. No shared closet. No toothbrush next to mine. No framed wedding photos on the walls. Just white paint and blank space. It almost felt like starting over, if starting over could feel both heavy and light at the same time. What I did not know when I signed that lease was who lived in the townhouse right next to mine. I found out on my second day there. I was carrying a heavy box from my car, walking up the path, when the door next to mine opened. She stepped out. We both stopped like someone had hit a pause button. Her face went pale. My stomach dropped. It was Lillian. My ex-wife's mother, Derek. She said quietly, "Amy didn't tell me you'd moved here." "She doesn't know," I answered, shifting the box in my arms. "I didn't know you lived here either." We stood there in this strange silence, like both of us were waiting for someone to yell, "Cut!" and end the scene. Lillian had always been kind to me when I was married to Amy. She never took sides when we fought, never talked bad about me, at least not in front of me. She was in her early 50s, but somehow she looked younger. Brown hair with silver streaks she wore neat and simple. Calm eyes. A soft voice that could make even a bad day feel a little less sharp. "Well," she finally said with a small smile, "I suppose we're neighbors then. Let me know if you need anything." That was it. She went back inside. I went back to unpacking. For the first few weeks, we barely saw each other. I left early for work at the architecture firm downtown and came home late. She did the same with her own routine. Sometimes I heard her front door close. Sometimes I saw her car pull in. When we did cross paths, it was just a quick nod, maybe a small hey before one of us looked away. Awkward, yes, but still something I could live with. The strange thing was, even though she was my ex-wife's mom, I did not hate seeing her. It was almost the opposite. There was something peaceful about knowing she was next door. It felt like there was this small island of calm right beside my mess of a life. Her townhouse always looked perfect. Flower boxes on the windows with bright colors. Patio chairs that matched. Everything looked clean and planned. Meanwhile, my place still had boxes stacked in the corners and a half-built life scattered on the floor. Then came that Thursday morning. I woke up around 6:45 because I could not sleep. My brain was doing its usual routine, replaying every mistake I had made with Amy. Every argument. Every moment I should have kept quiet but did not. Lying in bed felt useless, so I got up and decided to water the small herbs I had bought the week before. They sat in cheap pots on my balcony, and I kept forgetting they existed. The sky outside was soft orange and pink as the sun came up. The air was cool and still. I filled an old plastic cup with water and stepped out onto the balcony. A few birds were chirping somewhere. The complex was quiet. That kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. I started pouring water over the sad basil, not paying much attention, letting it overflow. That was when I glanced toward Lillian's townhouse. Her living room window was maybe 20 feet away, close enough that I could see inside because the blinds were tilted open. I could not help it. My eyes just went there. She was in her kitchen, standing by the counter, making tea. She wore a cream-colored silk robe that fell just right on her. Her hair was pinned up, loose pieces falling around her face. She was humming something soft while she moved around, reaching for a mug, the kettle, a spoon. She looked so calm, like she was in her own little world where nothing hurt, nothing rushed, nothing demanded too much. I knew I should have looked away. You are not supposed to stare into someone's home. I am not a creep, and yet I just stood there. My hand kept tipping the cup, water spilling over my fingers, soaking my shoes. I could not stop watching. It was not about her robe or anything like that. It was the peace, the way her shoulders were loose, her face relaxed. I had not felt that kind of calm in so long that I almost forgot it was real. Then, she turned her head. Our eyes met through the glass. Time stopped. My face burned hot. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to run back inside, slam the door, and pretend none of this ever happened. But my legs would not move. I stood there, caught, like a teenager busted doing something stupid. She did not look angry. She did not look embarrassed or shocked. She just looked at me, really looked at me, with this knowing expression like she could see straight through everything I was carrying. Then she smiled. Small but real. She set her tea mug down on the counter and walked closer to the window. When she was right there, just a few feet away on the other side of the glass, she opened her mouth and spoke. I heard her voice clearly through the quiet morning. Want a look? My breath caught in my throat. Before I could react, before I could say anything or even look away, she reached up and slowly closed the blinds. I stood on that balcony for what felt like 5 full minutes, staring at those closed blinds, my shoes wet, my hands still gripping the empty cup. My face was on fire. My hands shook so hard I had to set the cup down. What did that mean? Was she making fun of me? Was she warning me to mind my own business? Or was she serious? Those 3 words stuck in my head like a line from a song. Want to look. Not angry, not harsh. Calm, direct, like she was asking a real question. I finally went back inside, but for the rest of that day, and the days after, my mind would not let it go. The next few days were torture. Every time I stepped out of my apartment, my stomach twisted up, wondering if I was going to run into Lillian. Part of me hoped I would. Part of me wanted to hide forever. I kept replaying that morning in my head. Her calm face. That small smile. Those 3 words. Want to look. I started changing my routine just to avoid her. I left for work earlier than usual. I stayed late at the office, pretending I had extra work when really I just did not want to walk past her door at the same time she did. I would peek through the front window before opening my door, like some nervous kid checking for monsters in the hallway. It was ridiculous. I was hiding from my ex-wife's mother who lived 10 steps away. For 4 days I did not see her. No glimpses through the window, no quick nods in the parking lot, nothing. Somehow, that made it worse, like the whole thing had been a strange dream that would not leave my head. On the 4th day, I finally saw her again. I was taking out my trash, holding a black bag and heading toward the dumpsters near the parking lot. The air was cool and quiet. Birds were hopping along the fence. I closed my door a little too hard behind me, and I heard another door open. Lillian stepped out. She was wearing old gardening clothes, jeans with dirt on the knees, and a faded t-shirt. She held a towel in one hand and some small plant containers in the other. She looked up when she heard my door, and for a second, we just stared at each other. My heart jumped into my throat. Then she smiled like nothing strange had ever happened between us. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she called out. I nodded because words felt stuck. Yeah, I finally managed. She gave a small nod and turned toward the community garden area at the edge of the complex. No mention of the balcony. No mention of her window. No smirk. No, wanna look. She just walked away like everything was normal. Somehow, that made me even more confused. A week passed like that. Then, another. We bumped into each other near the mailboxes, in the parking lot, on the stairs. We shared small talk. Weather, work, random things neighbors say to fill the silence. She never brought up that morning again. I definitely was not going to. But something had changed. There was this strange energy between us now. Our eyes lingered a little longer. Her smiles were a little warmer. When we passed each other, it felt like we were both aware of the same unspoken thing. Something sitting between us that neither of us wanted to touch. One Sunday afternoon, I was on my living room floor, surrounded by wood pieces, screws, and a folded instruction sheet that might as well have been written in another language. I had bought a cheap bookshelf from a big box store, and it was winning. I had been working on it for 2 hours, and had managed to connect 3 crooked pieces that wobbled when I breathed near them. I was staring at a diagram that made no sense when there was a knock on my door. I got up, stepped over planks, and opened it. Lillian stood there. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun. She had that same calm look she always had, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. I heard banging and some cursing through the wall. She said, trying not to smile, "I thought you might need help before you hurt yourself or the furniture." I laughed because she was right. "Yeah, this bookshelf is beating me." She stepped past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, but somehow it did not feel rude. It felt natural, like she had been here 100 times. She looked around at the scattered pieces on the floor and then at my sad leaning half-shelf. "You're using the wrong screws," she said, kneeling down. "I'm using the screws that came with it." I said, defensive for no reason, "Yes, but you're using the short ones where the long ones should go." She pointed to the tiny symbols on the paper. "See this mark here? That means long screws." I leaned in and realized she was right. I felt stupid. Oh, that would explain the wobble. She picked up the screwdriver. "Here, let me show you." Her hands moved fast and sure, taking apart my mistake and putting it back together in the right way. She explained each step in simple words. In 10 minutes, we had a solid frame standing on the floor, no wobble, no mess. "How did you learn to do this?" I asked. She did not look up as she answered, 22 years of marriage to a man who got angry every time something broke but never actually fixed anything. If I wanted something done, I had to learn to do it myself. She handed me the screwdriver. Our fingers brushed for just a second. It was a small touch, almost nothing, but it sent a spark up my arm. She pulled her hand back a little faster than she needed to and stood up, dusting off her knees. "Well," she said, her voice softer, "now you know which screws go where. You should be able to handle the rest." "Thank you," I said. "Really, you saved this bookshelf's life." She smiled and started toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Derek, right?" she asked, then laughed at herself. "I mean, I know that's your name." "I just mean, we've never really talked as neighbors." "Yeah," I said, "I'm Derek." "And you're Lillian?" "I am," she nodded. "It's nice to officially meet you as a neighbor." Not just as Amy's mother. The way she said it hit me in the chest, like she was gently moving that old label to the side, making room for something else. "It's nice to meet you, too," I said. After she left, I stood in my messy living room, with the screwdriver in my hand, staring at the door she had just walked through. My heart was beating faster than it should have over a simple home repair. 2 days later, there was another knock. I opened the door and found her again, this time holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. Steam seeped out from under the edges. "I made too much lasagna," she said. "If I keep it all, I'll eat it all and hate myself, so I'm giving you some before I make bad choices." "You really don't have to do that," I said, but I stepped back and opened the door wider at the same time. She walked in like she belonged there now, heading straight to my little kitchen table. "Do you own plates, Derek? Or are you still eating out of takeout containers?" "I own plates," I said, grabbing 2 from the cabinet. We sat down at my small table. The lasagna smelled amazing. We ate in comfortable silence at first, then the small talk started to stretch into something else. She told me about her garden and her battle with tomato plants. I follow all the instructions. She said water, soil, sun, they still die on me. I think they hate me. I told her about the old library I had been working on for a year, how the city kept changing the plans and arguing about budgets, how every time I thought we were close, someone pushed it back again. It sounds exhausting. She said it is. I admitted. Feels like they want it fixed, but also want it broken so they have something to complain about. She laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. It warmed the room. We talked for almost 2 hours. Books, movies, work, nothing and everything. She did not cut me off or try to give me advice. She just listened in a way that made me feel like my words had weight. When she stood up to leave, she paused at the door. "You should come over for tea sometime," she said. "My patio gets nice light in the mornings. It's peaceful. Good place to think, yes." I said too fast. I mean, yeah, I'd like that. After that, morning tea on her patio became a regular thing. I would wake up, get dressed, and knock on her door. She always had the kettle on and 2 mugs ready. We sat together on her small love seat, watching the sun climb over the buildings, listening to the complex slowly wake up. We talked about small things and deep things. Her childhood in a small town where everyone knew everything. My dad teaching me to draw building plans when I was 10. The way both of us sometimes feared we had wasted too many years on the wrong people. One morning, she looked more tired than usual. Her eyes were red and soft around the edges, like she had not slept much. I asked if she was okay. She took a long breath and told me about her ex-husband, Richard. 22 years of marriage, a life built together, plans for retirement, quiet dinners, shared holidays, then late nights at the office. Unfamiliar perfume, phone calls in other rooms. A woman named Jennifer from his law firm. She told me how he had sat at their kitchen table one day and said he wanted a divorce. Just like that. No warning that made sense. He told her he had fallen in love with someone else, that he was unhappy, that he did not want to pretend anymore. The worst part wasn't that he left, she said quietly, staring into her cup. The worst part was how he made me feel like I had failed at something basic. Like I wasn't enough. Like all those years meant nothing. I did not know what to say at first. So I told her, my side. How Amy and I met in college, fell fast, got married too quickly. How our first year was good and the second year cracked open slowly. Money, expectations, family. Fights that never really ended, they just took breaks. The day she said she wanted a divorce, I said, I felt relieved and sick at the same time. I was tired of fighting, but I also felt like a failure. Lillian reached across the small table and put her hand on mine. Her touch was warm and steady. "You didn't fail," she said. "Staying with the wrong person doesn't make you a failure. It just makes you human." Everyone wants love to work. Everyone holds on too long sometimes. Something inside my chest loosened a little. I had been carrying that weight for months, maybe years, without even realizing how heavy it had become. We sat in quiet after that. Not awkward, just still, like we both understood something new about each other. From that morning on, things felt different between us. Deeper, more careful, more real. I found myself thinking about her at work, wondering what she was doing, if she was on the patio, if she was reading one of her mystery books, if she was thinking about me too. I started fixing small things around her place without her asking. A crooked screen door, delivery boxes at her door. She started leaving food by mine, container of soup, a note about a coming storm. Little things that made my empty apartment feel less empty. Somewhere in the middle of all those small acts, the line between my ex-wife's mother and my neighbor started to blur. And that was when everything began to really change. One evening, instead of knocking on her door in the morning, I showed up at sunset with a bottle of red wine. Her patio was glowing orange from the last light of the day. I felt stupidly nervous, like a teenager showing up for a first date, even though I kept telling myself this was not a date. She opened the door and saw the bottle. "Trying to change our tradition," she asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe I just wanted an excuse to stay a little longer, I said, sitting in my usual spot on her patio love seat. She looked at me for a second, in a way that felt like she could see right through the joke and into the truth. Then she said, "You don't need an excuse, Derek. You can stay as long as you want." We poured the wine and talked like we always did. She told me about her dream of seeing Tuscany one day, the rolling hills, the old stone buildings, the tiny churches. I told her how I wanted to design something that actually mattered, not another office block, but a building that would outlast me, something people would love and use every day. The sky went from gold to purple to dark blue. Stars started to appear above the roofline. I did not want to leave. Sitting there with her felt easier than anything had in a long time. No edges, no tension, just quiet connection. When I finally stood up, my chest felt tight, like I was walking away from something important without fully understanding what it was. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation we had shared. The way she laughed when something really amused her. How she said my name with a soft kind of care. How her hand felt on mine when she told me I had not failed. It was not just attraction, even though I would have been lying if I said that was not there. It was deeper. Being with her made me feel seen, in a way I had not felt in years. Like she was looking past my mistakes and seeing something still worth knowing. A week passed. Mornings on her patio became our normal again, but something had shifted since the night with the wine. We sat closer. Our knees touched, and neither of us pulled away. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me. Sometimes she would catch me looking at her. We both looked away a little too fast. Then came the storm. One Wednesday afternoon, the sky turned dark in a strange way. Heavy clouds rolled over the complex and the wind picked up. Minutes later, rain came pouring down so hard I could barely see the other side of the parking lot. Thunder rattled the windows. I was sitting on my couch with a book in my hands, but I was not really reading. I looked outside and saw her on her covered patio wrapped in a thick shawl, just sitting there watching the rain. Something about seeing her alone in that gray light hit me hard. I did not think. I just moved. I went out my door without a jacket. Rain hit me full force, cold and fast. By the time I crossed the grass to her patio, my hair was dripping, my shirt glued to my skin. She turned when she heard my footsteps and her eyes went wide. "Derek, what are you doing?" "You are going to catch pneumonia," she said. I wiped water from my face and tried to smile. "Then share your shawl with me." She laughed in a way that sounded more free than I had heard in a long time. She moved over on the love seat and lifted one side of the shawl. I sat down next to her and she draped it over both of us. We were close, shoulder to shoulder. I could smell her perfume, light and floral, mixed with rain and damp air. For a while, we did not talk. We just listened to the storm. Rain pounded on the patio cover. Thunder rolled across the sky. The world outside felt loud, but under that shawl, it felt like a small secret place made just for us. "People don't really listen to rain anymore," she said softly. "They just run from it. They race from car to door, always trying to stay dry. But I like it. It reminds me that some things are bigger than my problems." I turned my head and looked at her. Her hair was slightly damp where the shawl did not cover it. Her eyes looked darker in the storm light. "Maybe they just need the right person to listen with," I said. She met my eyes. The air between us felt charged, like the moment right before lightning hits. My heart hammered in my chest. Every part of me wanted to lean in and kiss her. Another part was scared to break what we had by moving too fast. When I finally stood up, she reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were warm even though the air was cold. "Derek," she whispered. I turned back to her, my pulse loud in my ears. "If you ever want to look," she said, barely louder than the rain, "just ask." My heart stopped for a beat. Those were the same words she had said through the window that first morning. But now they meant something else, and we both knew it. I took a breath. "I am already looking," I said. "Not just at you, at how strong you are, at how you survived being hurt and still show up, at how you make me feel like I matter again." She stood up. We were so close, our breath mingled in the cool air. The shawl still wrapped both of us together. Rain pounded above us, but I barely heard it. She leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to step back. I did not. Our foreheads touched first, then our lips. The kiss was gentle, careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile and rare. No drama, no wild grabbing. Just two people who had been alone for a long time finally meeting in the middle. When we pulled back, she rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that, listening to the storm, saying nothing. I did not know how long we stood there. Time felt strange, stretched out and soft. Eventually, the rain softened and the thunder moved away. "I should go," I said, even though I did not want to. She nodded, but did not move away until I did. I walked back across the wet grass to my apartment, soaked but lighter somehow, like I had taken the first real breath in months. That night, I lay in bed thinking about that kiss. About what it meant. About what came next. I was nervous and hopeful and scared all at once. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. My chest buzzed with this restless energy. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside to check my mail. Lillian was already there. She stood by her mailbox, letters in her hand, her face hard to read. Not angry, not happy. Just guarded. "Hey," I said, walking toward her. She gave a small nod. "Morning, Derek." I waited for the small smile she usually gave me. It did not come. She stared at the mail in her hands, not at me, about last night. I started, "That was..." She cut me off fast. "We should probably just forget that happened," she said. The words hit me like a punch, straight to the gut. I actually stepped back. "Forget it," I repeated, my voice rough. "Lillian, that was not a mistake. Not for me." "I know it was not," she said, glancing around like someone might be listening. A car drove slowly past us. She watched it until it turned the corner. "But people are going to talk. This place is small. Everyone notices everything. And you are my ex-son-in-law. Do you understand how complicated that is? I cannot do that to myself. Not again." Before I could answer, a silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The engine was quiet and smooth. The kind of car that tells you its owner likes control. A tall man in a sharp gray suit stepped out. Perfect hair, expensive watch, cold eyes behind a polite smile. "Graham," Lillian said, her voice suddenly too careful. "You did not tell me you were coming." "I was driving through the area and saw your car," he said, walking toward us like he owned the sidewalk. "Thought I would check in. Make sure you are doing all right out here all alone." The way he said "alone" made my teeth clench. He looked me over slowly, from my worn boots to my t-shirt, and smiled in a way that was not friendly at all. "And who is this?" he asked. "Just a neighbor." I said, "Derek." He stuck out his hand like it was a formality he had to get through Graham Mitchell. An old friend of Lillian's. A very close friend. The way he said close told me everything I needed to know. Days followed where Lillian and I barely spoke. Sometimes I saw her through her window reading or moving things around the living room. Sometimes she saw me on my balcony. Our eyes met for a second, then both of us looked away like the glass between us was a wall we did not know how to climb. One afternoon, my coworker Brandon came over with takeout. "You look awful," he said, dropping a bag on my table. "Let me guess. Woman problems." I told him everything. The window. The tea. The kiss in the storm. Graham and his perfect car. Brandon listened, then shook his head. "Derek, you cannot fix someone who is still bleeding from another person. You will just get cut. Maybe you should walk away before this breaks you." Maybe he was right. The safe thing would have been to back off. To protect myself. To move on. Then I looked out my window. Lillian was on her patio trying to move a heavy stone planter by herself. It kept slipping from her hands. She looked tired, frustrated, on the edge of giving up. "I am going to help my neighbor," I said, standing up. I walked across the grass. She looked up when she heard me, and for a second I thought she would tell me to leave. Instead, she let out a long breath. "This stupid planter is too heavy," she said quietly. "I cannot get it where I want it." "Then let me help," I said. We moved it together, straining and pushing until it slid into place. Our hands touched more than once. Neither of us pulled away this time. When we were done, she turned off the hose and the world went quiet, except for the faint sounds of kids playing somewhere in the complex. I ended things with Graham. She said suddenly, staring at the wet concrete. "For good this time. I called him yesterday and told him to stop coming around. Told him he does not get to tell me how to live anymore." I studied her face. "Are you okay?" She gave a tired little smile. "Not really, but I will be. I just could not keep letting fear make all my choices. I was so scared of people talking. So scared of getting hurt again. I was ready to push away the first good thing that has happened to me in years." Her eyes were shiny, but she did not cry. "Not yet, Derek," she said, looking at me like she was handing me something fragile. "I know what it feels like to lose people, to build walls so thick nothing gets in. You tell yourself you are being smart. But those walls keep out the light too." I reached for her hand. She let me take it. "Then maybe it is time to open the windows," I said softly. She studied my face for a long moment, then squeezed my hand tight. "You are too patient with me," she said. "Most people would have walked away by now. Maybe I finally found something worth being patient for," I answered. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her as she finally let herself cry. Not the broken kind of crying, but the kind that comes when you finally put down something heavy. "I am tired of being afraid," she whispered. "I am tired of caring what everyone thinks. I just want to be happy." "Then be happy," I said into her hair. "Stop asking for permission." We stayed like that while the sun slid lower behind the buildings. Kids laughed in the distance. Someone started cooking dinner, and the smell of garlic drifted through the air. The world kept moving, but for us, everything felt still. When she finally stepped back, wiping her face, she laughed a little. "I probably look terrible." She said, "You look perfect." I answered, and I meant every word. That evening, I sat on my balcony as the light faded. The shared light between our units glowed warm. When I looked over, she was on her patio too, a cup of tea in her hands. This time when our eyes met, she did not look away. "The storm is over," I called quietly for now, she said, but she smiled. I stood, walked down my stairs, crossed the grass, and went up to her patio. She moved over on the love seat without a word, making space for me. We sat side by side, close enough that our shoulders touched. After a while, she spoke. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said. "I tried to push you away. I really did." Quote, "I noticed," I said with a small smile. "What changed?" she asked. I looked at her, at the woman who had lost so much and still showed up. At the woman who had become my quiet place in the middle of everything. I realized being alone and safe is not better than being with you and scared. I said slowly, "I would rather take the risk." She reached over and laced her fingers with mine. "Me too," she whispered. And that was the moment I knew we were done pretending this was just neighborly kindness. Whatever came next was not going to be simple, but we were going to face it together. Spring came slowly to Riverside Commons. The trees that had been bare all winter started getting new leaves. Flowers popped up in the community garden beds. The air felt softer, warmer, like the whole place was waking up after a long sleep. Lillian and I fell into a rhythm that felt simple and right. We did not sit down and define anything. There was no big talk about labels. We did not rush to call it anything. We just showed up for each other, day after day, and whatever we were grew from there. Most mornings, we ended up on one patio or the other with coffee or tea. She would talk about a new recipe she wanted to try. I would complain about my boss or tell her a funny story from the office. On paper, it sounded boring. In real life, it felt like exactly what both of us needed. One Saturday morning, she was out in the garden area near her patio, pulling weeds and trimming plants. I walked over without her asking and knelt beside her. "You're here early," she said, not looking up. "Couldn't sleep." I said, "Birds are too loud." She smiled. That's what happens when you choose peace, Derek. It comes with birds. We worked side by side for hours. We planted new herbs where old ones had died over the winter. We fixed the little fence around her garden. We got dirt under our nails and grass stains on our knees. When we got tired, we sat in the grass and drank lemonade, talking about nothing important. It felt small and ordinary. That was what made it feel so special. That afternoon, the Carmichaels from Building C had a retirement party in the courtyard. They invited the whole complex. String lights hung across the open space. Music played near the pool. Tables were covered with food. People laughed, drank, and told stories. Lillian and I walked over together. I noticed people watching us. A few smiles, a few whispers, curious looks, the kind of quiet judgment that used to scare her. Now, she slid her arm through mine and held on. She wore a simple yellow sundress and her hair pulled back with a small clip. She did not look like she was trying to impress anyone. She just looked comfortable in her own skin. We ate, talked to neighbors, listened to speeches. After a while, people started dancing on the grass. Couples swayed slowly to the music. Kids ran between them, laughing. I stood off to the side, hands in my pockets, feeling awkward. Lillian came up next to me. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I don't really know how to dance," I said. "At least not without stepping on someone." She held out her hand. "You told me once you didn't know how to love again either. You still figured it out one step at a time." I looked at her hand, then at her face, then took it. She led me onto the grass. We did not really dance. We just moved slowly, back and forth, to the music. Her head rested against my chest. I could smell her shampoo, something clean and floral. "People are staring," I said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "Let them. I'm done hiding from being happy." When the song ended, I heard a few people clap. Mrs. Patterson from Building B gave us a big thumbs up. Mr. Chun nodded at me like he approved. A few others just looked curious, like they were trying to figure out our story. For the first time, I did not care what version they came up with. The next week, I found Lillian on her patio in the late afternoon. She sat with a small notebook in her lap, pen in her hand. "What are you working on?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Nothing important," she said. "Just writing down some thoughts." About what I asked. She tapped her pen against the page and thought for a moment about how love isn't supposed to feel like getting struck by lightning. "What is it supposed to feel like then?" I asked. She looked out at the garden, at the small plants pushing through the soil. "Rain," she said finally, "steady and quiet, sometimes annoying. Sometimes you wish it would stop, but it's what makes everything grow. It's what brings life back." I took her hand and threaded my fingers through hers. "I guess we made it through the storm then," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We didn't just make it through," she said softly. "We learned how to stand in it without running away." Quote. Later that evening, we sat on her patio again, watching the sunset. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. The colors were so bright it almost looked fake. She watched the sky for a while, then turned her eyes on me instead. "What?" I asked, smiling. "You still look at me like you can't believe this is real." She said I can't. I admitted, but I stopped pretending I don't want it to be. She laughed quietly. "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said, "but you're still here." She reached over and placed her hand on my chest where my heart was beating. "When you moved in next door, I thought you were just another lonely man trying to stay busy so he wouldn't have to feel anything. Fixing shelves, unpacking boxes, watering half-dead plants." "Accurate," I said. "But somewhere along the way," she went on, "you started fixing things in me too." The parts one thought were broken for good. The sky grew darker, and stars began to appear. As the first ones came out, I turned to her, "Lillian. I said I never said thank you for what she asked, for that first morning. I said when you caught me looking through your window." Quote. She smiled, that same small, knowing smile I had seen through the glass all those months ago. "If you want to look," she whispered, leaning closer, "just ask." I smiled and kissed her. No hesitation this time. No fear of what people might say. Just a simple, steady kiss that felt like closing one chapter and opening another. When we pulled back, tiny drops of rain started to fall. Not a storm, just a light spring shower tapping against the patio cover. We stayed right where we were. 7 months later, on a Tuesday morning that looked a lot like the one when it all started, we sat on that same patio, drinking tea. The sun was coming up. Birds were singing. The world felt calm. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from what I was about to do, Lillian, I said. She looked up. Yeah, I got down on one knee right there, between the little table and the potted plants. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Will you marry me?" I asked, not as my ex-wife's mother, not as my neighbor, just as you, just as the woman I love. Tears filled her eyes immediately. She nodded before the words came out. Yes. She said, yes. We got married 2 months later in the community garden. It was small and simple. A few neighbors. A few close friends. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears. Mr. Chun shook my hand so firmly I thought he might crush it. The Carmichaels brought champagne. There were no fancy decorations. No big hall. No huge crowd. Just us, standing under the open sky in the place where everything had quietly grown. 6 months after the wedding, we bought a house together on the other side of town. We packed up our apartments at Riverside Commons, the ones that had held all our old lives, and moved into a place that was truly ours. The house had a big back porch and a garden that needed work. The walls were blank and waiting for new photos. The rooms had space for memories we had not made yet. Now every morning starts the same way. Tea on the porch. Her hand in mine. The sound of birds in the trees. The world waking up around us. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we sit in silence. Both feel perfect. People think love is about big moments, dramatic fights, grand speeches. What I learned with Lillian is that real love is mostly small things. Morning coffee. Shared jokes. Quiet support when the day has been hard. Remembering how someone likes their tea. Fixing a crooked door just because you know it bothers them. It is the daily choosing, the patient listening. The decision to stand in the rain together instead of running away alone. Sometimes, when the light hits our kitchen just right, I still see her the way I saw her that first morning. Calm, steady, moving through her space like she belongs in it. She catches me looking and smirks. "Want a look," she whispers. And every time, I give the same answer I already am.